Good morning, everybody. Welcome, one and all. Today, I will brief you about diabetic ketoacidosis. The goal of this lecture is to cover the practical part and management of diabetic ketoacidosis, but I will brief you about the pathophysiology involved in diabetic ketoacidosis. When you take the diabetic ketoacidosis as a whole, you will find the abnormality in two metabolisms. One is glucose and another one is fatty acids. See, these two metabolisms are influenced by the insulin has individual role in the metabolism of glucose and fatty acids. The insulin role in glucose is glucose, it increases the glucose uptake of peripheral organs, muscle, and it increases glycogenolysis, it increases protein synthesis. Insulin influence on fatty acids is it increases esterification of fatty acids and decreases the lipolysis. Insulin also increases the VLDL, very low density lipoproteins clearance. In DKA, the hormones which are increased are glucagon, catecholamine, cortisol, and growth hormone. On the other side, the insulin is decreased. Due to this imbalance of the hormones, the metabolism of the patient is affected, which leads to hyperglycemia, increased keto acids, which causes acidosis. Firstly, we will see the influence of these two hormones on pathways. For example, insulin causes decrease in gluconeogenesis, glycogenolysis, and ketone bodies in the liver. It also decreases the free fatty acid and amino acids release from the adipocytes and the peripheral muscles, while glucagon does the opposite thing. The decrease in insulin and hyperglycemia causes the decrease in fructose 2,6 bisphosphonate. Normally, the fructose 2,6 bisphosphonate, which is converted to fructose 6 phosphonate, the fructose 6 phosphonate is again converted into fructose 1,6 bisphosphonate, which undergoes glycolysis, which is a glucose breakdown, thus decreasing glucose. But here there is decrease in fructose 2,6 bisphosphonate. In turn, there is fructose 6 phosphonate deficiency, which causes decreased glucose breakdown. So there will be hyperglycemia. The other ways through which the glucose is increased in body is there will be increase in phosphoenol pyruvate carboxylase activity. This is the enzyme which converts oxaloacetic acid to phosphoenol pyruvate, which forms fructose 1,6 bisphosphonate, and finally it forms glucose. So insulin deficiency accelerates this pathway, increasing the glucose in the body. And second is the counter hormone of insulin is glucagon. This glucagon excess decreases the pyruvate kinase, which helps in conversion of pyruvate enoyl phosphate to pyruvate, due to which the glucose breakdown is reduced and the glucose in the body is increased. So, summarizing up, the primary causes of increase in glucose in DKA patient is the increase in phosphoenol pyruvate carboxylase, decrease in pyruvate kinase, and increase in Glycogenolysis, the breakdown of glycogen to glucose, which are caused due to increased glucagon and catecholamines. And GLUT4 receptors are decreased because of decrease in insulin, and there is decreased uptake of insulin in the periphery in DKA. First is hyperglycemia, which is seen in DKA, and second is ketosis. The ketosis is increase in ketone bodies. These ketone bodies come from free fatty acids. The free fatty acids, which are produced in excessive level in the body because of decreased insulin, increased catecholamine, and growth hormones. These free fatty acids normally in the liver are converted to very low density lipoproteins. But since the glucagon is high, it alters the hepatic metabolism, and due to which the free fatty acids are converted into ketones. These ketone bodies, when they come into circulation, they form keto acids, and these keto acids will cause rise in pH. The increase in glucagon level in the body will cause increasing in an engine. It's not that important, but I will tell you the name. It will activate carnitine palmitoyl transferase, which is a which helps in transport of fatty acids into the mitochondrium and form the ketone bodies. I have already emphasized the point of how the ketone bodies are increased in the body, and this increase in ketone bodies will raise your pH level. And second one is the pH is also increased due to lactic acid. The lactic acid increase is attributed to decreased volume in the body due to hyperosmolar state, or there is increased fluid loss due to polyuria. Okay, there are two type of ketone bodies which are produced in the body, and especially in diabetic ketoacidosis. The first one is beta hydroxybutyrate, and second one is esteostate. Of these two, the beta hydroxybutyrate is produced in threefold, and esteostate is produced in less amount than beta hydroxybutyrate. Now you know what happens, the pathophysiology and the hormones involved, what are the pathways involved in diabetic ketoacidosis. Let me paint the clinical picture of diabetic ketoacidosis in front of you. You can say the abnormality in DKA is the insulin decrease. The insulin decrease happens in type 1 diabetes or type 2 diabetes. The old name being type 1 is insulin dependent and type 2 is non-insulin dependent. Now the name is obsolete. For example, the type 1 diabetes patient can present with DKA, and as a first presentation, and after DKA he might be diagnosed as type 1 diabetes. In type 2 diabetes, who are on insulin therapy, who are not compliant with the treatment, or been inadequately taking insulin therapy, can land into DKA. Other factors, there are some precipitating factors which will increase the insulin demand of the body, which can cause DKA. They are the sepsis, pneumonia, and any vascular injury, myocardial infarction, or or some drugs and during pregnancy can cause DKA. Now, how will the DKA patient look? Usually, DKA patients, the first presentation, maybe they are young age or the patients who are already diagnosed as diabetic on oral hypoglycemics or insulin therapy, they come to emergency with complaints of nausea, vomiting, increase in thirst, polyuria, and abdomen pain. There may be shortness of breath, and patient may have altered mental status. The main feature or the main presenting feature being the abdominal pain. Abdominal pain, usually epigastric pain, it may mimic as pancreatitis, but there is a clear differentiation between the pain of pancreatitis and DKA, which is which you can find through lab investigations. And the most specific marker is lipase, not amylase, because in DKA there is increase in lipase. So we have already uh, mentioned the precipitating factors of DKA. One is sepsis, pneumonia, and myocardial infarction. See, like when you see a patient, you will the patient will tell some features, those are called symptoms, and other side of the coin is what you will find. If you see the pulse, you can find the tachycardia. You can see the tongue, the skin, the patient may be dehydrated. If you measure his BP, the patient may have hypotension. You should check for skin turgor. The patient may have tachypnea. This tachypnea is increased efforts of respiration, which is due to acidosis. It is also called Kussmaul breathing or H1 breathing. There is abdominal tenderness, I have already mentioned as pancreatitis, and this I have already mentioned. Patient may have lethargy, altered mental status, and one thing I want to mention, the altered mental status, if it is present in children, most commonly is due to cerebral edema. And if it is present in adult people, you have to see for other causes of altered mental status like dyselectremia, sepsis causing related things. And the patient may have hypotension. The hypotension is due to decrease in volume and with vasodilation. Now you know how the patient present with the TKA to you. When the patient present to you with the TKA, you will primarily manage according to airway, breathing, circulation. You will draw a blood sample and send the investigations. The investigations usually are the routine investigation, but most primarily you want to see in a TKA patient is serum glucose level. Yeah, the serum glucose level usually in TKA patient is greater than 250. There are two things in DKA, the DDs of DKA. One is DKA and second is hyperosmolar syndrome. The hyperosmolar syndrome, you will find hyperglycemia greater than 800, but in DKA it is greater than 250 with serum ketone positive, urine ketone positive. What are all investigations you have to send? You send for urine routine and ketone, you send for serum glucose, obviously, check for serum electrolytes, blood urea nitrogen, serum creatinine, get a VBG, get a ECG, plasma osmolarity. And these other investigations like blood culture, urine cultures, x-rays, and lipase, these are for the precipitating factors which may cause decay. For example, if you suspect that there is underlying MA which is causing this DKA, you can find it out on ECG. Okay. Then now you have a broad idea what are investigations you have to do. What are now coming to differential diagnosis of diabetic ketoacidosis. The one thing is starvation ketoacidosis, where bicarbonate will be greater than 50 milliequivalents. And other things is all high anion gap metabolic acidosis are differential diagnosis for DKA. The other can be lactic acidosis or any poisonings, aspirin poisoning. Now coming to the main important part is the management part. The management is for any patient, the first management is airway breathing circulation. Coming to the emergency, first stabilize the patient, see, check all the vitals, place a 16 gauge needle, preferably 216 gauge needles. The 16 gauge needle is usually a gray color needle, and place a Foley's. Then establish the diagnosis of DKA by seeing blood glucose level with glucometer. If it is greater than 250, then get a ketone check. Ketone is also done with strip. If it is greater than 1 or 2, then the patient can be confidently categorized as DKA, because the ketone becomes the main marker of diabetic ketoacidosis. It differentiates DKA from simple hyperglycemia. So, while managing DKA, there are around 2-3 protocols of managing DKA, but here what we follow and what usually followed is American Diabetic Association guidelines. I will make it a step by step procedure for you. The first rule, whenever a DKA patient comes, the emergency protocol, airway breathing circulation, and second thing is establishing the diagnosis by random blood sugar and ketone levels, and third is hemodynamic instability or the patient has DKA. The first step is managing fluid correction. The fluid correction should be 2 to 3 liters should be corrected, because the fluid deficit in DKA patient is assumed to be 3 to 5 liters. So that much fluid should be corrected, and 1 liter per hour is routinely given for that patient. And the fluid of choice is 0.9% NaCl, which should be given at 1 liter per hour. And one exception for this rule is cardiogenic shock. In cardiogenic shock, if the patient is in cardiogenic shock, then you can't give more fluids. You should manage him accordingly. And up to what time the fluid should continue? The fluid should continue over 24 hours of time after the patient is hemodynamic stable and there is a adequate urine output, usually 1 ml per kg per hour. Then change the maintenance fluid to 0.45% of normal saline. This 0.45% of normal saline will do two things. It will check the hypernatremia, iatrogenic hypernatremia, which is caused due to your correction, and second thing is it will prevent hyperchloremic acidosis. This fluid correction increases the insulin responsiveness and decreases plasma osmolarity and decreases the stress hormones, which you already know they are catecholamines. So after fluid support, initially with 0.9% NaCl, 1 liter per hour, and later followed by 0.45% NaCl. The second thing is the potassium correction. Don't rush to start insulin infusion. The first parameter you should see after fluid resuscitation is potassium level. Usually potassium initially when you measure, it may be high, because there is associated acidosis component with it, so initially the potassium may be high. But if your potassium is less than 3.3 milliequivalents, then start potassium supplement 20 to 40 milliequivalents per hour. See, the one point I want to emphasize here is, if you are giving 40 milliequivalents per hour of potassium, it can only be given through central line. And if the potassium should be corrected rapidly because of erythemias, then they should be corrected through the central line. And if the serum potassium level is 3.3 to 5.3, give 20 to 30 milliequivalents in every liter of IV fluid we are already administering to the patient. If the patient level is greater than 3.5, you check the potassium level after 2 hours, because after correcting with the fluid replacement therapy and starting the insulin, it will decrease the potassium level. Now, the third part of management of treatment of diabetic ketoacidosis is insulin infusion. Usually there are two ways of insulin infusion. The first method is, give regular insulin 0.1 unit per kg as IV bolus, then start insulin infusion of 0.1 unit per kg per hour IV continuous infusion, and regularly check for 1 hourly glucose or 2 hourly glucose. And if the serum glucose is not decreased 50 to 70 mg per dl in the first hour, then you can double the insulin level around 0.2 unit per kg per hour, and your target glucose will be 200 to 250. When serum glucose reaches the 200, then decrease the regular insulin infusion to 0.02 to 0.05 units per kg body weight per hour. This is one method. And second thing is, without IV bolus infusion, you can start directly IV infusion of insulin. You can start at 0.14 unit per kg body weight per hour. Okay. And the fourth important thing in managing DK is acidosis. Usually the bicarbonates are used up by the keto acids which are produced in the body, and there are no reserves of bicarbonate replenishment. But giving bicarbonate in DK patient is not advised in any of the literature. The bicarbonate is only advised when pH is less than 6.9. Then sodium bicarbonate is given at 100 millimoles in 400 ml H2O or D5, and along with it 20 milliequivalents of KCl is infused over 2 hours. And you can repeat this bicarbonate for every 2 hours, and your target of keeping your pH is 7.1. Here I would like to emphasize on one point. If you are correcting an acidosis patient, because the acidosis is associated with erythemias of heart and sudden death, your target of correction should be the 7.1 pH, and the bicarbonate should not be raised 10 millimoles above the deficit at a time. So after correcting the pH, after continuous infusion of insulin and correcting your pH, the insulin infusion should be stopped when the ketone level becomes negative, or when the glucose becomes less than 250 mg. Now, there is a treatment dilemma. Already patient is diabetic, when you are going to switch him to regular insulin, subcutaneous insulin from the infusion. One thing is like when the patient is hemodynamically stable and he is taking by mouth, then stop the infusion, start on long acting insulin and regular subcutaneous insulin. Now coming to monitoring of the patient who is being treated for a DKA or who is on insulin infusion. Every hourly, the vital should be monitored like BP, pulse, heart rate and saturation, and every 1-2 hourly get a VBG for pH, serum electrolytes, and every 2 hourly or 1 hourly get a RBS done, and every 4 hourly serum electrolyte should be done. The main emphasis of DKA management is regular monitoring of the patient and correcting his electrolytes and insulin infusion rates. What are complications of the treatment? We are treating with fluid replacement therapy, insulin and all. What may be the complication? One of the complications we already are correcting is hypokalemia, which can happen. And second complication is hyperchloremic metabolic acidosis. It can happen with 0.9% NaCl. So 0.45% of NaCl will prevent hyperchloremic metabolic acidosis. Or early switch of 0.9% normal saline to Ringer lactate can also prevent this hyperchloremic metabolic acidosis. So, when to empirically start antibiotics? One thing we should clearly remember in diabetic ketoacidosis is a condition where there is increase in C-reactive protein, there is increase in leukocytes, and there is increase in triglycerides. It doesn't mean the patient is in sepsis, but if you find a septic foci, the patient is in sepsis, or you are in the tertiary centers where the chance of catching the superbugs is common, then start on empirical antibiotics. And finally, 100 units of insulin in 500 ml NS is made, then it is infused following this formula. The patient RBS by 100 into 20 unit into 20, it will give ml per hour. Okay, if the patient RBS is 450, between 450 and 500, then multiply with 20, 350 to 450 multiply with 10, and 250 to 350 multiply with 5. If the patient sugar falls less than 150, start on 5% DNS and continue insulin infusion. The insulin infusion should be continued over 24 hours until his ketone levels comes to normal or sugar comes to normal, or a slow rate of insulin infusion of 0.02 to 0.05 should be considered until unless the long acting insulin which you administered takes the place of the insulin, because a small window gap between the insulin administration can again revert DKA. Thanking you one and all. I tried to be brief. I think that it will be really helpful to you. I am Arjun, JR Internal Medicine.